No, I was joking. I was joking.
We're doing
I was joking.
hashtag.
The neat thing is, I figured to get to know people and to kind of grow a relationship with people, I need to serve. Serving is just part of my DNA. And so I got invited by Donna Lagudis, who said, oh, join the greeters. So I said, oh, great. I'll get, people have been saying hi, so I might as well get to know some people. But I didn't know that this was like a bait and switch, because shortly after she says, how would you like to lead the team? So that's now what I'm doing, is leading the team. And it's awesome because everybody is so dedicated. And that is one of the best things about being a part of this church, is that people are just in 100%. And anybody who's interested in greeting, certainly come see me.
I think one that we invest in is the foster adoption ministry is one. I know another is just doing things in the community. There for a while we were going out and mowing lawns and doing things like that for people in the community. Those are, I think, the big things, doing things for others.
There's such a strong youth ministry and his kids ministry. I mean, all of our kids pretty much grew up from elementary to junior and high school here at this church, and just being part of that and that investment in our children, watching them grow in their love for Jesus and sharing that with the rest of the family has just been wonderful.
Thought we decided you were going to take this one.
I definitely think that you have to put in to get something out.
The ability to get involved with other people, even in a kind of responsibility session, aside from showing up for church, showing up for a small group, those are the things that I think have helped us get invested with other people, and they with us as well.
So I'm invested in the church. We're working with the ushers now, trying to get that program back up and going and get more people involved in that. The church is just invested with me because I have people that I didn't even really think knew who I was that reach out to me and check on me on a regular basis. And just, as Jill said, when my mom passed away, folks had just started messaging me that I really wasn't sure exactly who was at the time, but that just meant a whole lot to me.
And then I'd say the preschool program we have utilized. Our son went through the Mom's Day Out, which is amazing, and then I'm teaching first grade Sunday school and working with the foster adopt ministry. I think in this world where we're so lost, it's important that we continue to plug in even when we're uncomfortable. It's easy to stay in our bubble. And I think that when you have the opportunity to interact with people who don't look like you or even believe like you, the church is the place that we want people, because then we can teach them to love Jesus. And that is such a neat common denominator. And I think that there's many avenues to get involved at this church that maybe you haven't looked into, and you should, because I was skeptical because I was nervous, but it was worth it to get plugged in and find a home.
Today we wrap up our I Love My Church series. Next week will be Disciple Now, so you'll get to hear from the kids' Disciple Now speaker and from their D Now band, so it'll be a fun time for that. And then, like you were informed earlier, on the 13th, John will be coming in and preaching that day. But today we're talking about invest. We say Bulverde Baptist Church exists for people to belong in community, grow in a relationship with Jesus, and invest in the lives of others. The truth is, we are all where we are today because of an investment from someone. For me, my investment from my parents. My dad was a deacon, my mom taught Sunday school. The time that they spent correcting me and loving on me and teaching me. But I remember people inside the church, a lady like Jeanette Bowen, who me and my best friend at the time, his name's Brett McDaniel, all we wanted to do was build these cardboard boxes and we'd stack them up and knock them down. That's all we wanted to do. I mean, we were 5 years old. We were in the kids ministry, and to me, that was the highlight of Sunday school. And she knew that. So what she allowed us to do was she would say, if you behave during the lesson, then you and Brett can build your towers and tear them down. And I was like, yes, ma'am. And I'll tell you what, we did our very best to listen because all we wanted to do was build those blocks as high as we could and then just knock them down. It was just so much fun for us to do. The other thing is we had another teacher, Barry Wheeler, who dealt with middle school boys, who was the guy who was instrumental in keeping us middle school boys' attention on the lesson and allowing us to still be middle school boys. And it was his class where I remember playing with a lighter on your leg, and then you were told stop and didn't realize that the gas was still spewing out onto the jeans. And like any other middle school boy, about 40 seconds later, you forgot what the last instruction was, and so struck the cigarette lighter, on the pant leg, and the leg caught on fire. And yeah, he just didn't skip a beat in his lesson and loving on us. I remember people like Scott McDaniel, and my youth pastor when I was in middle school, or my high school youth pastor. I wanted to be just like Scott. I would get up there and I would see him, give a devotion, and I was like, man, like God speaks to this man. And I remember hanging out with him, like after school, we'd go over to the youth building and play ping pong, and I would just ask him question after question after question. What does the Bible say about this? What does the Bible say about this? And he just continued to pour into me week in and week out. People like Jeff Johnson, a guy when I was doing my undergrad work, I got it in counseling, and I had to observe someone in a field that I wanted to be in, and Jeff was a pastor, so I did 90 observing hours with Jeff Johnson, and we sat in the car and we just talked about church, about ministry, about life, about parenting, being a father, being a husband. And I was none of those things at the time, but I wanted to know everything he knew about those things. There are people who have invested countless hours into me, loving me and pouring into me to help me and shape me who I am today. And all of us have stories like that. We could take turns of people just coming and sharing the mic of a time someone came to us and said they gave more time than they probably should because they loved me. And today we're talking about that investment and what it looks like. It's not easy. It'll probably cost you more time than you thought you had. It'll cost you more in emotional energy that you feel like expending. It may even cost you money that you didn't think you'd spend on. But when we invest in the lives of others, we're doing kingdom work, and God will always reward that investment. I want to look at Acts chapter 9 today, and a couple of verses here. Last week we talked about a guy named Saul. And here, we will look at the story a little further. In Acts chapter 9, starting in verse 26, it says, and when he, meaning Saul, had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe that he was a disciple. I love this, verse 27. But Barnabas. It says, but Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles and declared to them on the road that he had seen the Lord and spoke to him, and how on Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. But Barnabas. For many of us, we have that Barnabas. When someone wasn't going to give us the shot we thought we deserved, or we were trying to get, or maybe we were just struggling and didn't know which way was left or right or up or down, but Barnabas. There were those times in our lives that people came alongside of us and put their arms around us and said, I can help here. But Barnabas. You look over in chapter 11, verse 23 through 26. It says, when he came and saw the grace of God, he was glad and exhorted them to remain faithful to the Lord with steadfast purpose. For he was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and of faith, and a great many people were added to the Lord. So Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. And when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. And for a whole year, they met with the church and they taught a great many people. And at Antioch, the disciples were first called Christians. We say one more time, Barnabas, he hears of this report of Saul, and he goes with him and partners with him. But Barnabas. If you have your bullets on the back, if you're taking notes, what does it really mean to invest? To pass along what the Lord has done for you. There are things that God has done in your life, and he didn't do those just for you, but for other people as well. What does it mean to invest? To pass along what the Lord has done for you. So what has the Lord done in your life? Look back. What has God done in our life? For some of us, he may have healed your marriage. There was a time that divorce was on the table, and this is what we're discussing, and then now divorce isn't even an option because God has restored that hurt, that brokenness, and God healed our marriage. You know the Lord didn't do that just for your marriage. There are other people who need to hear that story too. You know, maybe God has healed you of a hurt from a divorce. Maybe you're on your second or your third marriage, and God has healed your hurt from that brokenness and that pain from that divorce. Do you know that there are people who need to hear that in their life? What God has done in your life is not just for you. It's to pass along what the Lord has done in your life. Well, maybe you in your past had an addiction. You're addicted to drugs or alcohol, and now you're sober. Do you know that to invest in someone, to share that with someone else? Because there are other people who may be walking or soon could walk through those same steps that you did. That's not part of my story, so I don't know what to look out for. But those who have been down there do. The problem is sometimes the church has done a poor job in trying to say this is what right living and holy living looks like. We've shamed people's past. And so people are afraid to say, well, this is part of my past, and God has redeemed that. And what God has redeemed, God has restored. And what God has redeemed and restored, God uses. But many other times we just kind of let those things sit in the back because we're embarrassed of them. What does it mean to invest in people? To pass along what the Lord has done in your life. Well, maybe you've had a broken relationship with your kids. There was a time where there was the 3, 4, 5 Christmases in a row where there was no phone call, there was no text, there was no communication, but now you meet together on a regular basis for lunch, or you go to their house and see their grandkids. That wasn't the case maybe 4 years ago. Do you know there are people who need to hear what that is and what that looks like? Or maybe that's been none of your story, your testimony, because I grew up in the church thinking that God can't use me because I never had that season where I went and sowed all my wild oats. I've never been drunk, I've never been high. I didn't have those college experiences that everyone would say that may be normal or whatever. I didn't have that. And so I grew up thinking that God can't use me because I didn't have this like night and day thing, except for I actually do. Because without Jesus, I was lost and he found me. Without Jesus, I was dead and he made me alive. So the truth is, maybe your marriage has been healthy from the get-go. And divorce has never been a topic of conversation for you. Can I tell you, you need to share that people because people need that encouragement. You need to share what God has done in your life. Well, maybe you have a great home life and your kids love to hang out with you and you hang out with your kids. Matter of fact, your kids are now grown and your grandkids are a part of your life and everything is just really great. Share that. If that's the work of the Lord in your life, then be proud of that. Say, this is what God has done. Like, I have a relationship. My son will tell me these things, or my daughter will tell me these things, and it's just not really normal, but I just bless the Lord for these conversations that I get to have. Share with others what the Lord has done in your life. Maybe you were parents or Christians and you were raised in the church. At a young age, you made a decision to follow Jesus. And then now you're an adult and your kids are being raised in church, and at a young age, they've made a decision to follow Jesus. Can I just tell you That's a testimony, and it's a great one. Share. So what does it mean to invest? Sharing with others what the Lord has done for you. But how do I do that? Not just, do I get a t-shirt made and walk around and be like, and be that weird person? Pastor, how do I share with people what the Lord has done? Do I just yell across the person at the gas pump and be like, hey? And they're like, yes. And just start striking up a conversation with them? Is that how I do it? I don't know, maybe. Let me know how it goes. Here's two things I believe that we do. One is you look for you-shaped opportunities. There are things and situations that I will be involved in that you may never have the opportunity to do. There are people that I know that you'll never in your lifetime meet or know. There will be homes that you go to and have lunch and dinner at that I don't want to even know these people at all. But you need to look for you-shaped opportunities. You say, well, how do I do that, Pastor? One is, what do you like to do? What do you like to do? Well, I like to golf. Okay, use that. And the first service I told people is like, if your favorite thing to do is sit on a Sunday afternoon and watch football, then that's your opportunity for the kingdom. And they're like, now, Pastor, seriously, how can watching Sunday football be a thing for the kingdom? Oh, it's quite easy. You look at 4 or 5 guys that you know and you say, hey, guess what? We're watching the game at my house. And for all those women whose husbands leave their home to go watch the football game somewhere else, you just gave them an afternoon of peace and tranquility. Now, you may have to be creative and maybe send your wife somewhere and give her, $20 and let her go on a shopping spree. Am I missing something here? Is $20 not, babe, is that not a shopping spree? Oh. Ministerially speaking, $20 on a shopping spree. But you invite these men over to your home, and then at halftime you say, hey, here's the deal. Rather than listen to these guys yell and scream about what they believe, who should have passed more or who should have, ran the ball more, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pause the game, and I want you to, on your next round to the nacho bar, I want you to write down something that I can be praying for you over the next week about. I said, yeah, a bunch of guys are going to go over and watch the game, but now you are taking the opportunity to invest in them. And they may write down something and you follow up on Tuesday and say, hey, how's your meeting going? How's this happening? Yes, you can use Sunday afternoon football watching for the kingdom of God. Most of us just aren't really quite creative enough to think that God works outside of the auditorium. I'm here to tell you, he probably works in bigger ways than just inside the 4 walls of the church. What do you like to do? What are you good at? Whatever you're good at, pass that along to someone else. Like a tradesman would with his apprentice. I'm going to teach you how to do something. Y'all know I'm not the greatest construction worker, handyman or guy there is, but I've got some friends who are, and I've learned a thing or two, or I think I've learned a thing or two from them, to the point the other day, my wife was like, this switch is broken, you need to fix it. And so I shut the power off, because I learned by watching someone else do it, before you mess with electricity, you shut the power off. I learned that when they said, well, you don't think it's important? Here, hold this. I learned real quick. No, I'm kidding. That didn't happen. But at 10 o'clock at night, I'm over there, and I've got the switch out, and I've got the plug switched over, and Caleb's helping me hold the flashlight like a good middle child. And I told him, I said, well, flip the power back on. We'll see if it sparks. We got it right. Sure enough, we found out it was connected to the doorbell. So the doorbell would go off, ding dong, 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, okay, it works. Go ahead and shut it off. We get everything plugged back in, put it back in the wall. I'm like, okay, flip the doorbell, or flip the power back on. The doorbell comes on, to which my wife comes out. Who's at the front door? What's going on? I'm like, I fixed the switch. All proud. she was not as excited in that moment that I was fixing the switch. But the thing is someone who's not very technically minded, I'm not a craftsman, I'm not a home builder, I'm not an electrician. I was able to do that because someone passed down the knowledge to me on this is what you should do, and definitely this is what you should not do. Our faith is no different. I want to say that again. Our faith is no different. The problem with this, many of us aren't having these faith conversations. We talk about the football game, but we won't invite people over and minister to them in the moment. We'll talk about electricity, but we won't invest in the time in teaching them something so they can be a better homeowner themselves. We talk about a lot of things, but we don't take the time to invest. And what I want us to know is the way you invest is you just look for opportunities that fit you. When someone comes up and asks you a question, hey, I've got a question, that's usually a warning sign should go off and say, God can use me in this moment. When someone says, hey, I want to ask you a question real quick, that should be a light should go off and go, God can use me in this moment. Because someone has come to me and asked my opinion on something, which means I have their attention. 1 Corinthians 10:31 tells us, so whatever you do, whether you're eating or drinking, whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Even the nacho bar, even the football game, even in showing someone some homeowner trips, thank you, tips and tricks. That was a hard one for me. Tips and tricks. You have their attention. Look for U-shaped opportunities. What knowledge do you have and what resources are available to you? Someone ever come to you and ask to borrow something? Do it with them. Get shoulder to shoulder. And before you're done, say, hey, what can I pray for you about? Invest in them. It's not hard. And the last thing is, why must I invest? I get what it looks like, and I get how I'm supposed to do this, but why should I have to do it? What's the need? Well, Jesus did it, and he requires it from us. Jesus in his teachings, before he would do things, he would gather his disciples and would talk to them and say, hey, we're going to go in here, we're going to do this, and here's the purpose of what we're going to do. Or after a parable, or after a teaching, he'd gather them up, and he would say, hey, here's what this is. Here's what's going on here. And then he actually sent them out for them to try it on their own. Jesus modeled this investment for us, and he requires it from us. Matthew chapter 28, starting in verse 16, it says, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. Here's what, I want to stop right there. Here's what that means to me. Here's what I hear. There are people who are going to be called to the right place. Some will respond right, and some will just sit there. Jesus called them to the mountain, and they went there. Some worshiped, and some doubted. Then he said, all authority in heaven, on earth, has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded. And behold, I am with you to the very end of the age. How do you make a disciple? You invest in them. You invest in them the same way a skilled tradesman would with a journeyman. You teach them what you know, and then you turn them loose to practice those things. You don't make disciples by getting up and just yelling a verse and someone saying amen and they become a Christian. Most of the time it's through coffee date after coffee date, lunch after lunch, meeting with them, praying with them, answering their questions, struggling with them. I had a meeting this week with a gentleman. He says, here's what I believe about Jesus, but here's what I'm confused about. You know what I said? Let's meet next week. I can't say, yeah, I could have said, well, that's tough for you. Sorry you don't understand that. Or I can invest. And it's not going to be taken care of over just one lunch. This may take 6, 8, 9 months, or years. But when it comes to kingdom investment, the return is always worth it. But before we end, I want to ask ourselves the question, why don't we? Why don't Christians spend more time investing their time, their talents, their treasures in the kingdom? Why don't we do that? You could say, well, we don't know how. Well, we've covered that. You look for U-shaped opportunities. But I think the real reason goes a little deeper. I think the reason goes a little deeper because joy, thanksgiving, and gratefulness are characteristics that mark a true believer. Joy, thanksgiving, and gratefulness are characteristics that mark a believer. And yet, so many times, we as followers of Christ find ourselves complaining. We'll complain about this, we'll complain about that. The list can go on and on. It could be things inside the church, it could be things outside the church. But I think the root of complaints really comes from entitlement. It comes from an entitlement attitude or an entitlement spirit. Because I like to think of it this way. We walk into H-E-B expecting to buy some bread. Because H-E-B it's a grocery store. That's what their job is. They provide bread. And you walk in and the bread you wanted isn't there. And our response isn't thankfulness, joy, or gratefulness. It's, you kidding me? There's no wheat buttered split top bread. And so we start searching around and, well, I guess we'll buy this. And, well, that loaf's not as big. And, well, you know, that one's got the green tab. I'm looking for the ones that red tab because that means it's fresher. And we complain about not getting the bread we want when we didn't realize we didn't grow the wheat in the first place. We didn't process the harvest. And we didn't turn that wheat into dough, and we didn't knead it and add yeast. We didn't bake it, we didn't slice it, we didn't package it. But boy, howdy, when we get to H-E-B and they didn't have what we wanted, we're mad. Because we're entitled. I should be able to go there and buy bread. I should get what I want. I heard a missionary, he was with Compassion International. It was when we were at youth camp in Estes Park, Colorado. And the college students, I was up there with them, when the youth group was up there, and this guy from Africa was with Compassion, but also worked with Student Life Camp. And we had these counselor meetings after it was all over with, and one of the Student Life staffers was talking. He says, I had to go into town, and man, everybody and their dog was out there. I mean, it was stuck in traffic, and it took me forever. It took me like 25 minutes to get back here, and he was just griping about the traffic. I'll never forget this guy. I don't remember his name, but he was like, why would you ever complain about being in traffic? And of course, everyone there, raised in America, we're just like, because it's traffic. You're not going anywhere. You're wasting time. He said, do you know what it requires when you don't have a car? You picked up 3 times as much stuff that one person could carry. In my life, we had to walk 10 miles and pick up a third of that and carry it back with us, only to make that same trip the next day or the following day. The fact that you can take all that and be hindered by 20 minutes. We should never complain about being in traffic. We're in a car. We're in a place where we're able to pick all that stuff up. He's like, I just don't understand it. It's what with you Americans. I'll never forget being so humbled in that moment. Why? Because I have a car, and there's paved roads, and there's a grocery store, and there's debit cards. What do you mean there was a card error? Swipe again. Oh, we're entitled. We want what we want, and we want it earlier. Yet God has called us to a lifestyle of joy and gratefulness and thanksgiving. And we're called to share what the Lord has done in us. If you're a believer, you were dead and he made you alive. That's something to celebrate. And if we can't get excited about the work that Jesus did in our life, and that doesn't want us to compel to tell other people who that is, then we've got some work to do. We've got some heart adjustments to do here. Instead, we look at what Jesus has done, and although we would never say it with our lips, our lives look like we're completely put up with and fed up with this thing we call the Christian life. We are called to invest in one another. Your broken past that God has redeemed you from, God has called you to live that out and share what God has done in your life with other people. Good marriage, bad marriage, single, divorce, it doesn't matter. If God has done a work in your life, share that with someone. Look for opportunities that fit your profile. You-shaped opportunities. Why? Because Jesus has brought you to this point, and he's going to use you to bring other people as well. We're going to close today in a time of just celebrating the joy that God has given us. We're going to sing that song again. And during that time, if you would want to pray, you've got something you're going on, then I just invite you, while we're worshiping, just to come down and talk with me or one of the deacons. I just want to, as a church, celebrate the fact that there's joy in the house because of what Jesus has done. So let's stand our feet and close in a time of prayer. Lord, thank you for who you are. Thank you for the power that you have and that you've given us, that we now do not have to be a slave to sin. Thank you for the kindness that you give to us that we do not deserve. Thank you for the love demonstrated on the cross that would compel us to live a life of gratitude, a life of thankfulness, a life of joy because of the work you've truly done. Thank you so much, God, for who you are. Let us live a life of joy. Amen.
We worship the God who evermore will next time.